Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome. I'm sitting here with Rus Devorah Wallen, correct?
Wallen.
Should we do it again, or are you okay?
Okay, rewind.
Should we rewind?
Take two.
I think it's good. So people understand your personality right from the get-go. Rus Devorah Wallen.
Yes.
Did you grow up Rus Devorah?
No, I grew up as Darcy.
Darcy.
Yeah.
How did Darcy become Rus Devorah?
Oh, you want that whole story?
Yes, the whole story.
Okay, I might be late for my next event. I was brought up in a Reform background. Not a Reform school, a Reform background. And I went to Sunday school, and I liked Sunday school. I was the weirdo who wasn't throwing spitballs and paper airplanes. And
Sunday, like Hebrew school?
Sunday school, Reform doesn't really have Hebrew. Some people do.
But Jewish.
Jewish.
Right.
And I liked whatever I learned, and it wasn't enough. And I asked a lot of questions, and no one had any answers. It was bogus. And I said I wanted to learn more. And then I decided I wanted to become a rabbi. So when I graduated high school, I applied to University of Cincinnati. They had a music program, so I was a music major. And I figured I'll hang out in the Hebrew Union College. And I started getting into the choir there and singing for the choir. But it wasn't really very Jewishly inspirational. It was more of a performance. So that wasn't enough.
Right. So I want to make sure I understood what you said. You said that you asked a lot of questions in Sunday school. I imagine in all subjects you were interested in learning more. Was there something specific?
But I was really interested in Judaism.
Okay, it was something
and they
struck
had
a chord with
crappy
you.
answers.
Gotcha.
So I would say something like, why do Jewish people keep kosher? And they'd say, oh, don't worry about it. There's no trichinosis in ham anymore, and there are USDA laws, and you don't need to worry about those things. Or tell me about the soul. Oh, there's no soul. They really did not have answers that were satisfying. I said, I know some people keep kosher, some people keep Shabbat. Why are they doing that? Well, that's antiquated. I never got good answers. So I thought, I'll become a rabbi. Maybe I'll get answers and give them to people. And then I met a rabbi on campus. I met a Chabad rabbi, and that was it. I asked a few questions. He answered them well. I felt understood.
Can we name drop? Which rabbi?
Maybe not today.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Just for everybody's privacy.
Okay.
But that was an amazing thing for me, and that was an opener. And then I went for Shabbos meal, and that was an opener. And then I kept learning, kept going to the Chabad community, studying with the people. And I knew I didn't want to become a rabbi anymore. I wanted to become observant. And the rabbi kept saying to me, Darcy, you need a Jewish name. And then I would write into the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a blessing, Darcy Bas Joan. After a while, Rabbi Klein says, we need some Jewish names over here going on. So the name alone has a story behind it. I don't know if you want to go that far. Yeah. Okay. So in Buffalo, I'm not going to drop names here either, I went to the Chabad house because my rabbi in Cincinnati said, go to Rabbi Greenberg in Buffalo and find out how you get a name. Okay. So I went to the Chabad house and I asked Rabbi Greenberg, how do I get a Jewish name? He said, after shul today, go home and pick up a Tanakh, a Bible, and study the Bible, and find a role model there whom you want to emulate. I go on to the women's side of the shul right after this conversation, and I'm meeting brand new people. One woman comes to me and says, hi, what's your name? I say, Darcy. She goes, no, your Jewish name. I said, I don't have one yet. She goes, oh, everybody has a Jewish name. Your name is Darcy? Your name must be Devorah. And I'm like, no way. And I shut out that name and that stupid lady. I'm like, there's no way. I heard that you need to have a little prophecy. My rabbi said to study, to learn, to find out who. The parents have some kind of prophecy when they name their children. I'm like, how could this lady do that? And I blocked out that name. So I went home. I read the Tanakh, the Bible, and you know what? I said, Rus. She changed her life midway. I didn't know that converts call them that. There are Israelis that call themselves Ruti, right? It's not a classic name like a Hannah or a Chaya or a Rivka. But I said, this woman changed midlife. She changed around. She chose the Jewish nation, and that's what I'm going to do. I was born Jewish, but without the education. Well, wouldn't you know, after a couple months, the name Rus Devorah starts torturing me. Okay? It's like a drippy faucet. At one point I went, as I'm searching, I went to Minnesota. Rabbi Friedman teaches there, or taught there in those days. We called it Minnesota for that reason. So I went to him and I told him this crazy story about this crazy lady and the name and how you're supposed to have, a little nevuah. And my rabbi said I should pick a name. And I picked, he said, do you know who Devorah was? Forget the stupid lady. Do you know who Devorah was? She was a leader, a general, a neviah, a prophetess. Forget the lady. That's probably your name. It keeps coming to you. Just, if you're okay, tell the Rebbe you've chosen a name. When you get back to your community, get a blessing at the Torah, a mishaberach. And that's what I did. Crazy thing. I mean, you think like, oh, she must be some ex-druggie having this experience. Well, that might be true too. But I go to the synagogue and I tell the rabbi I need a mishaberach for Rus Devorah Bas Joan. Maybe, I don't know if it was, and my father's name. Anyway, the minute I hear that name, it feels like a cool breeze enters the top of my head and fills my whole body.
The minute you heard it at the mishaberach.
The name Rus Devorah. Like, it was bizarre. It filled me. I said, okay, this is clearly my name. The lady's an idiot. She still is. I still know her. But it's my name. And it's weird. It's odd. I've never met another Rus Devorah. I met 2 Devorah Rusas when I was madrichat, Machon Chana, Machon Liadis. But
the rabbi in Buffalo, Rabbi Herschel Greenberg?
Yes.
He...
Herschel Greenberg, he's a very dear friend.
So he's...
Your parents...
My father was made...
became
religious, became observant
with Rabbi Greenberg. Yes. And Rabbi Gerari Ishtickle. Probably more with Rabbi Greenberg.
Rabbi Greenberg is the name.
Because he was his... Your father's smart. He needed a Talmud Chacham to learn with. Yeah. They were makar of a lot of people. A lot of people left Buffalo, let's just say.
Right.
I lived in Crown Heights for 30 years. I came back to honor my parents in their twilight. And my husband ain't going nowhere. Okay. He didn't like New York in the first place, so he's happy. We live in the suburbs.
Beautiful. So let's get to what you do, what Rus Devorah does.
Okay, so I'm a social worker, so that means I'm social and I work. I work with people. I love people. I have a private therapy practice and a consulting practice. I do supervision occasionally of social workers, and I do trainings, educational trainings. So tonight I'm actually giving a talk on marriage and communication. You're welcome to come.
Or we can get it right
Even
here.
with a good marriage, you can still come. And I just gave a talk in Long Island 2 weeks ago for the Nefesh, which is the Orthodox mental health professionals, on epigenetics and mental health. Now that is really cool stuff, really mind-blowing stuff. And I'm giving it again online next Friday.
The
Friday
epigenetics
morning.
and mental health.
Yes. And if you want, I'll send you a discount code.
Thank you. But let's talk about this one you're doing in tonight.
Tonight.
Yes. The one about marriage and communication in marriage. I think
it's interesting. I gave the Rebbitzin, Mrs. Feiner, probably 10 topics. And she brought it to the ladies of her committee, and they picked this one. Did you hear what I meant? So sometimes in communication, you can hear what the person said, but not really what was under the surface. And so tonight, what I'm hoping to do is go through a series of tools, communication skills, give them some skills building for marriage. So one of those skills would be teaching the couple's intentional dialogue from Harville Hendricks. Do you know Harville Hendricks?
I've heard of him.
So he has this very famous
Imago
book,
dialogue?
Imago relationship therapy.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I had the honor of taking a course with him, and I often use this couple's intentional dialogue, which is not really a dialogue. What happens is the person, you set up an appointment every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock when the kids are asleep, right? You pick a night and a time, and both people need to be available. If somebody's not emotionally available or needs to go out, you postpone it because you want everybody to be in a good state. And it's not really a dialogue. Each person thinks of a topic that upsets them or that they're pleased about, that they want to convey to their spouse or partner. And they convey that. So let's say I use this because my husband buys me flowers. So it makes me really sad that you never buy me flowers on the eve of the Sabbath, and all my friends get them, and I feel that you don't love me. Just a statement. So now the poor guy has to repeat it. So first, it's just parroting, mirroring it, right? It makes you really sad that I don't buy you flowers on the eve of the Sabbath, and your friends get flowers, and it makes you sad. Did I get it right? Yeah, you got that right. Okay, so now you go to the level of acknowledgement and validation. I see, I get it, I understand. Using intellect, what we call seichel. I get that it makes you sad that you don't get flowers from me on Erev Shabbos, and all your friends do. And then there's nothing else for her to do. Then the next level is empathy. Even if you can't empathize, like, why does she want these flowers? They die in 3 days. What the hell, right? He says, and you know what? If I were you, if I were the wife, and I really wanted flowers, and my husband didn't buy me flowers on Erev Shabbos, I would also be sad. That's the whole dialogue. There's no dialogue.
Just the one statement.
A statement.
Meaning it starts with one statement.
Meaning,
mirror it, validate,
I need to
acknowledge,
mirror it, validate it, and then empathize with it with no discussion. I don't ask questions other than, did I get it right? If I got the parroting right, usually the validating and the empathy go well. Sometimes people have a mouthful, and so they keep, but I also, and then they add another element, and then you have to repeat the additional element. Did I get that right? Yes.
Oh, so did I get it right, and is there anything else?
Yes, and you want to make sure that you got it right. By the end of this, it could feel absolutely satisfying or unsatisfying because we didn't resolve it. You didn't buy me flowers. I don't have those flowers, right? But he heard me, and he heard me again, and he heard me again. And if he didn't get it right, he heard me again. So you're hearing this and saying it at least 3 or 4 or more times. And hopefully that makes an impression. Not only that, you're developing 3 listening skills, communication skills, mirroring. Sometimes a person doesn't want you to teach them anything or fix anything or do anything for them. I had a really hard day today at school. You had a really hard day today at school? Yes, the kids were all freaking out. That person felt heard. That's all. You mirrored. Validated. Oh my gosh, I see. They were crazy.
So it feels, just listening to, saying, if I'm listening to this, and I am listening to it, it feels incredibly awkward. Like if I went home now.
Very awkward.
Right. To my wife and said, let's do this.
The first time it's very awkward. And usually when a wife needs her husband to be part of this, and I let's say 90% of my clients are women, okay? How do we get them in? So your audience will figure this one out too. We get the woman stronger and happier and healthier, unless whatever her challenge was that brought her to me, and then we invite him in. Generally wants to come in once he's seen all the movement. right? He's getting a good bang for his buck. His wife is not as kvetchy, and she's busier with her friends now, and she's not nagging him. And I don't mean to sound
Right, I get
mean,
it.
but she has developed her own independent life. And so he's happy to come in, and then I teach them the dialogue together. And it's best if someone who knows this can supervise it once or twice. Watch the dialogue happen a few times and coach them. So sometimes they forget, what do I do now, right? If you're not familiar with mirroring, validating, and empathizing, you may need to practice that. So we practice it in a session. It is very awkward. The hardest part is the empathy. And I can tell you the most surprising part of it is the husbands actually feel safe doing it because it doesn't bring the intensity of the emotions that maybe they couldn't deal with before and could never then satisfy her with whatever the kvetch was.
It can go the other way also, right?
Yes, that's true. That's true. But the surprise to me, the women all like it because they get to have a quiet conversation. Almost all the women do. But the men, it surprises me because they feel like, finally, I can get something across without the intensity. And so that's why you need an appointment with the person every Wednesday night at la. You need to make sure that each person is available emotionally. If someone just got off the phone with someone, the plumber, and
Right,
they're
they're not
angry,
present.
Okay, just wait. Let's do it in an hour. Let's see how you're doing then. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it needs to be totally here. It can't be here. There's no emotionality. You're just repeating and repeating and repeating. And maybe nothing happened. So that's the temporarily unsatisfying thing. But each person needs to take a turn. So now the other person, the husband will give his thing. Bothers me as soon as I walk in the door, everybody's on top of me. I really need a break. I just came from traffic. I just came from a hard day's work. So then she repeats that and repeats that and repeats that on the 3 levels. And what ends up happening, the more frequently you do it, if you do it every week, and you bring at least 1 dialogue per person, if not 2, because it takes 5 minutes. It does not take much time. Then you get used to this, right, neuroplasticity of practicing this way of speaking. I see that you're really upset. I understand. If I were in your situation, you just start practicing talking like that. So it bleeds into day-to-day life. The dialogues become very fulfilling because now you're talking deep. Even if you didn't resolve it then, but you know that person is listening. Tomorrow, he's going to do something about it. Friday, he's going to call the florist. Do you know what I'm saying? It's more likely when it's not bombastic.
Right. It's not an attack that needs a defense.
Not an attack, and the Rebbe used an expression, ba'ofen hanis kabel, in a way that a person can easily receive it. I'm not being attacked, right? There's no intense emotionality. There's no freaking out. There's no activation of the nervous system. It's just, this is our appointment. I'm going to tell you what's on my mind this week. You're going to tell me what, because what happens is, in the moment, and this is one of the points, one of the themes that I'm going to bring up, please God, tonight if I get there on time, just joking, is that you can never fix the roof when it's storming and it's raining and it's thundering and it's lightning, right? And so when people are feeling upset or anxious or angry or overwhelmed or sick or stressed, right? I've got a Rosh Tevos, an acronym, HALTS, HALTSS. Some people say HALT, I say SS. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, or stressed. You don't want to talk to someone about something important like an expense or a marital issue or something problematic with the kids. That's not when you bring it up. You wait until the person is calmer. In other words, you don't go, even if Eli Nash is the best roofer in town, I see you do construction, right? Just joking. If you were the best roofer in town, and it was storming and thundering and lightning, you wouldn't go up on your own roof to fix it.
So the analogy for here
is that in the storm, you don't try to fix it. There are three metaphors. One is someone's going to get hurt. I might slip off the roof. I might yell at my spouse.
Right.
It's not going to stick. It's wet up there. It's the adhesive won't adhere. The resolution is not going to stick. They don't even hear me. It's sliding off the roof. It's not.
Right.
They can't hear me. And last but not least, it might make the problem worse. Right? So the husband's on the roof fixing it, and there's a drip into a little pan. Now he says, oh my gosh, I put my finger in it, it opened up. Well, go get the garbage can.
Right.
Okay? Sometimes if you're in a bad mood, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, or stressed, you might accidentally harm the people you love the most in that thing. You might make the problem worse. It was just about, me coming home late, on Thursday. It's like, if she was in a bad mood, my coming home late on Thursday.
So it sounds like there's two parts to this. One is the way it's communicated, and the other is a designated time for this communication.
The beauty of Harville Hendricks' intentional dialogue, couples intentional dialogue, it's a designated time. You're not allowed to be in halts mode.
And then it also you don't feel the need to bring something up at that moment because you have a time.
There's no or you're brave. You say, okay, tomorrow night we have dialogue night. Let me write this down and remind myself. Do you know what I'm saying? Sometimes we need to strengthen ourselves in the moment.
Right. I did something at work where I noticed the first couple of years I had a company, every time we at the beginning we did payroll once a week, and we'd hand out checks, and every single time someone, as the company grew and it was 10 or 20 people, every weekend someone asked for a raise. And I was like, this is unbearable. So finally I made it. It took a few years in the company where I started avoiding these things, like get someone else to do it. It was so tedious. I said, what we're going to do is between January 15th and January 30th, it's coming up now, every single year, you have time to make all the cases you want. I'm available, or your manager will be available.
But it's only during
It's during then, unless
period
there's a major change in your job description and your responsibilities or something else.
Simplify.
Between January 15th and January 30th.
You designated time. And
open
then
season.
You're
I'm
peaceful.
Exactly.
For
the
the
rest of the
other
time.
11 months of the year.
Right. So from the employee standpoint, they don't have to sit there and wonder, okay,
Will
when am
I
I
get a
going?
raise?
Okay, I got a minute here with the boss. Let me ask him now. No.
In this
Prepare
month,
it. Yes.
you start preparing your
Make your case, and we'll hear it
Case.
out for as long as it is. And I've had people give me full-on presentations of everything they
And
did.
so during that month, because you've anticipated it, do you feel calmer during that month?
I feel calmer the whole year.
I bet the 11 months.
No, but even then.
But even that's
No, I'm not
exactly
worried about
what
it.
I'm
Right.
saying.
Right.
Because you resolved something. So exactly what you're saying, that there's a halachic term. You said you wanted to talk a little Torah.
Yeah.
So Torah fits in here in all of my work. There's a halachic term, I'm sure you remember the expression, Posp Pasalo. Posp Pasalo. There's bread in the basket.
Right.
You're not hungry because you see it right next to you, right?
Yes.
So if I know that tomorrow night or Thursday night or Friday night or after Shabbos, I have dialogue night with my husband, I can write that down and keep it on the back burner and feel like, okay, this is going to be discussed. It's a hard topic. If I bring it up to him now, it won't work. All right, I've got bread in the basket. I feel safe. I can bring that up, or he can bring that up to her. It's a relief.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea.
Relief.
Okay, so I have a question. I understand for something like buying flowers, how this can work real well.
Yes.
If the husband
Some things are much
internalized
deeper
that.
than a...
Right, let's say someone comes to their husband and is saying, I can't deal with your drinking. I mean, it's just way too much. You're getting drunk every Shabbos.
I've had that.
Right. So obviously, if the guy's dealing with the depth of an addiction, that's not going to be resolved.
No,
by
it won't be resolved
this
in
dialogue.
that.
But what might that do? Right.
But let's just say the person's stubborn, in denial of his alcoholism, hasn't gotten hurt enough from it, hasn't lost his marriage yet, hasn't harmed a child yet, hasn't harmed himself in the car yet, right? These are spooky things. Mm-hmm. Hasn't fallen and clunked his head yet, and his wife is worried. So if they have the dialogue, that's the quietest and safest place to bring it up. And you can bring it up in a very gentle, loving way. You could say, I know this is a really hard subject to bring up, and I would never bring it up during the week, but I have to bring it up now. I'm so sad and scared for you. You use that's another slide in tonight's presentation, using first-person language. Not you always drink, and you always get drunk, and you always embarrass me in front of the people at the Shabbos table. No, I feel scared. I'm afraid that you're going to have an accident. I'm sad. I'm sad for the kids when they hear you yell. It doesn't feel good. It became a dialogue. Maybe he will hear it. And sometimes I got stubborn people, women and men, in my practice. Sometimes I say, bring it up again. Bring it up each week if you need to, in the dialogue. Not in the middle of the storm.
Right.
Not when he just came home, or not when he drinks his first beer of the night. You're always drinking. That's not when you bring it up. You bring it up in the dialogue. Now, if he's really harming himself and he's unsafe, we don't want an enabling wife. We want to strengthen her that she can pick up a phone and call a doctor, call a cop, call a therapist, call somebody to get things going and drag him. Sometimes you need to drag a person. And in all of these podcasts that you've had, I'm sure you know about this challenge of people's insecurities or egos or denials that they're in a
Yeah, we talk a lot about addiction here. That's where that question came from, is when you're dealing with something that's more hard hitting.
Exactly. There's certain things that you really can't accomplish in a dialogue, but you were heard. So I would say the greatest accomplishment of the dialogue is it's emotionally not treacherous. It's less treacherous, even if it's a hard subject, right? If my spouse tells me they don't like my drinking, and I like to drink, right? I don't drink anymore, but I don't drink any less either. So I will be insulted even in the calmest discussion.
Right.
But I know that the spouse brought it up during the dialogue, and it was intentional, and it was thought through, and they're not attacking me. That's one thing.
Right. The
so
probability
the
of it
bombast
landing, yes,
is down.
Right.
The designated time is also another thing, so that I don't need to feel like urgent, like I got to get this out. Okay, in 3 nights, we've got dialogue night. Sunday morning, we have dialogue. I can wait. I can manage to wait for that. And the other thing is I love when I have couples who tell me we do it every week, and sometimes we do 2, and we had fun doing it. Because after a while, it does become normative. You feel like you're really listened to. You feel like you're really empathized with. At the beginning, it's weird. You're right. It's awkward.
I did something similar once.
Because it's formulaic.
I did something similar once with my wife. We did it's like a 2-day workshop one-on-one with, this woman, Haiti Schleifer? No?
No, I don't.
She's a Holocaust survivor. She's out in Washington, but she's a therapist, and she trains a lot of therapists on her model. And she did something similar to this, but there was also the way we sat and looked at each other.
So was it Gottman based, or was it wasn't Harville Hendricks based?
It sounded like it was influenced in part by him.
Maybe she's
created pulling
her
from a few
own
different
things. So that's kind of what I do.
Right, when we did it and we loved it, we got a lot from it. The feeling was that we can never do this at home, kind of thing. We don't we had to fly back to Washington. So I'm wondering about this, where you're talking about.
So it's not going to have the intensity of a group with
this
a facilitator.
Wasn't a group. No, it was a facilitator one-on-one.
A private facilitator.
Yeah.
So that's why I facilitate during an appointment. And sometimes, let's say my client, the wife, has an appointment. We'll invite him in for the last 15 minutes. He doesn't need to sit for an hour, 50 minutes. Have him come in for the last 15 minutes. And then we can accomplish 2 dialogues in 15 minutes. You would be surprised at how quickly you can do it. And then they get used to it. The last piece that's on my mind that's so beneficial is the bleeding into life. So as you practice that, you get better and better at it. You start talking like that to your loved ones, your children, your spouse, even work partners.
Right. Someone brings something up, you just parrot it back.
Say, oh my, that really, you must have been really upset when that happened. You start realizing that this is valuable to the listener. Who doesn't want their name called to them? Who doesn't want to be looked at in the eyes? Unless they've got serious problems. Who doesn't want to be attended to and listened to and heard? So this is the brilliance of this simple technique.
Beautiful. Okay. Is there anything more on this topic you want to add before I jump across the pond a little bit?
Not really. I was going to give an example of Posp Pasalo.
Okay, go ahead.
I take these courses, and sometimes I have to drive my way to them. You can't get there from Buffalo, whatever it is. So one summer I was taking a course in Cape Cod. From Buffalo to Cape Cod, it's a good 10 to 12-hour drive. Sunday was the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, which is a serious fast day about the destruction of the temple. Monday, my course started at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had to drive on Sunday. It wasn't a pleasure trip, driving on a fast day all day. And I said, how am I going to manage? I'm going to be bringing kosher food. It's going to be in the trunk. What am I going to do? 12 hours on a fast day. You got to crunch something or sip something or drink something. I said, you know what? I'm going to make the most delicious breakfast and put it on my seat with a cooling pack. So that if I want to eat, if I feel rebellious enough to pull over and eat something on Tisha B'Av, I have it right next to me. I didn't need to eat on Tisha B'Av. I got to my place. It was dark. I was able to eat. So sometimes, and I think I find this with clients and in marriages, and that's why this Posp Pasalo concept is so important. Sometimes a person depends on the spouse for too much, and they haven't filled their own life up. Like get a life. Sometimes the husband's too dependent on the wife is too dependent on the husband, or partners, right? And someone feels put upon, or overwhelmed, or resentful, right? Or can't keep up, right? But if you fill yourself and you feed yourself, and you've got Posp Pasalo, right? So with most of these women, I say, what about your friends from seminary? Where are they? Oh, they're all over. They're on shlichut. Okay, so can you call them? Even if you're out in the boonies, I got a lot of emissaries, shluchim clients. You got to connect with people. You got to walk. You got to eat well. You got to sleep well. You got to do stress management. You need to fill your thing.
Where's the term used, Posp Pasalo, in?
Okay, so I will share it. It's a kind of interesting thing. It's a little X-rated here, okay?
Okay.
So it's the halacha that refers to a couple where the husband has consummated marriage right away on that first night.
Okay.
So they got married, and then that night, she was available to him according to the Jewish laws of purity, and they did it together, and he's got now bread in the basket. If she is now what's called nida, no longer permissible to him, it's okay. He did it once. He's okay. He's good. He can live with her for the next 2 weeks without going too crazy. He did it.
Right.
Okay. If he didn't, and if he couldn't, or they couldn't, or she couldn't, or something happened, or she became a nida, and they couldn't do it yet, you need to have a person in that living space with you until she goes to the mikveh again.
So someone gets married on the
night
first
of the, time. Right. We're just talking the first time.
Someone gets married on the night of the wedding.
Can't be with her?
Right, can't be with her.
There was no bread in the basket.
Right.
Okay. once he's got bread in the basket, he's done it once, they can live together without supervision that first time.
Oh, fascinating.
Right? Hopefully. We're talking about, this sounds very innocent. Hopefully this man never did anything before they got married, and he's so excited. And it's after the wedding, and they've been dancing, and they're like, oh, you can't, oy vey. Then they need a supervisor. They need either a 6-year-old child sleeping with them or some kind of supervision, another person
Understood.
there.
Okay, so you're using this term for...
Yeah, it's a funny term, but
like
I use it psychologically, because if you feel deprived of something, anything, my food is in my trunk and I'm driving 12 hours, my food's right here. I'll eat it if I need. We've got dialogue coming tomorrow night. I've got important things to tell him, but I can be mature and hang tight, right? Or I feel very needy. I want my husband. He's coming home late tonight from work. What do I do? Fill yourself. You hungry? Go eat. You need social life? Call your friend. You need to entertain yourself? Watch something, do something, breathe, meditate, eat, read.
Right.
Something. Fill yourself. Don't be hungry or resentful, waiting for that filling to occur spontaneously.
I like it. Makes a lot of sense. And like I said, the analogy that I used in work, and I've witnessed and experienced.
And it's exactly that. You avoid the tension throughout the year, and that because you've designated, it's pleasant enough.
Right.
It's pleasant. Okay, I could do this for a month. I could
Yeah.
dole out raises for a month.
Or not, but at least
Or
we'll have
not.
the conversation. Right?
Or have the conversation.
Yeah. And I think it's much more, it's not only more relaxing for me, I think it's for everyone.
Yes, because they
feels
don't
better
need to
based on it.
worry about it for 9 months or whatever.
When am I going to get a chance to talk to him? You'll get a chance.
Exactly.
It's coming.
And he only gives us 30 seconds.
No, my agreement is if you want more than you need it. It's not necessarily me. It could be their supervisor or manager, but someone will sit with you and hear you out if that's what you want.
And then you satisfy them, and they're not chomping at the bit either.
Exactly. Okay, so let's switch topics a little bit. The very first time we spoke, it goes back a little bit.
Many months ago.
Yeah, over a year.
With Divi Bogart.
Maybe. I wasn't going to name drop, but you did, so it's good.
One of your guests.
So maybe even a year and a half ago. So one of the topics we discussed is healing and how it combines with Judaism. So before we go into there, what are your qualifications to talk about it, to discuss?
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I know some Torah. I'm Jewish, and people call me a healer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have been in practice for over 30 years, even though I look like I'm only 35. I was a child in social work school. And I'm into meshing the two together. So my company's name is Torah Therapeutics. My website is torahtherapeutics.com. And everything is either consonant with Torah or has been checked out to be okay with Torah, and or is Torah content.
Right. So specifically the question is around, I guess, what some would call alternative healing modalities, which I may refer to as ancient healing modalities.
Yes. Traditional.
Yes.
Either traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncture or healing herbs or phyto,
energy work,
chemicals, energy work,
plant medicines.
Exactly.
Everything.
All of those beautiful things.
After this evening, you're doing you said a talk on
epigenetics.
marital relationships.
Tonight,
right.
Yes.
So tonight I will be, after this, I'll be leading a small group in a rape ceremony. Are you familiar with rape? Mm-hmm. So the tobacco plant. And we're doing it with a gentleman who's, he's trained in some sort of Jewish musical, I forget exactly what his title is. So we're combining nigunim and rape. And we'll see how it goes. But yesterday someone called me and said, hey, I'm just curious, is this okay? Is this allowed? I was looking up where this comes from, and this is tobacco from the from the Amazon, and maybe they pray over it or do different practices. They consider it a spiritual.
So those would be
plant.
those would be concerns, right?
Correct.
You don't want anybody to have used the substances that you're using for any other religious or spiritual purpose prior to your utilizing. I'll give you an example with my work.
Yes.
So I have a Rav whom I ask these very, let's just say, complex questions, shilas, that have to do with Eastern religions.
Okay.
So Rabbi Yoram Ullman from Sydney, he's one of the heads of the based in there. So my Rav, Rabbi Heschel Greenberg from Buffalo, your father's friend, told me when he had questions about my questions to go to Rabbi Ullman. So one of my concerns was because, and this is a whole other story, maybe we have another podcast, but because I'm into meditation and I teach self-regulation, breathing, meditation, various techniques.
You've been doing this before it was cool.
For many, many years.
Right.
And I started, so the back, a teeny bit of the backstory is I was a crazy teenage child. And I'm a little ADD still, and I manage it with meditation, breathing, self-regulation. The healer needs to heal him or herself. And as a crazy teenage, wild, risk-taking maniac, my best friend's mom said you need to go to the Transcendental Meditation Center, which is based on Hindu format of meditation, which is mantra-based. And the mantra is actually in the Sanskrit language, which is the holy tongue of Hinduism. In Buddhism, the holy tongue is called Pali. So words that are in those languages, really, a Jew who cares about these things should not use those words. A, we don't know what they mean, and B, it's a holy language. I don't go around singing Latin songs anymore. I used to sing in Latin and church Latin, okay? Because when I was in college, I was a music major, and I had to sing all of these things. I wouldn't spoken Latin, conversational Latin you could use, but not ecclesiastical Latin. It's the church language. It's a holy tongue. And so is Sanskrit and Pali. So as a teenage kid, I went to TM. I was taught this technique. I felt like there was something weird about it, but once I started doing it, it saved me in school. I was able to focus. I was able to listen. I wasn't as wild and crazy. Maybe just a little bit less wild and crazy. But I was able to focus, and I was able to study, and I know it helped me. And I was doing TM, a meditation, 20 minutes twice a day. The meditations got boring, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to go spend $100 to go get another mantra. Now it's $1,500. You want to learn TM and get a Sanskrit word whispered into your ear? You pay $1,500 for that. So I said, I'm not going to spend that money. Let me go to a bookstore and let me find my own mantra. So I went to the University of Buffalo. I was from Buffalo. University of Buffalo College Bookstore. And I went to like the religious and occult session. And I see, choose your own mantra. $6.95, a Bantam Penguin book. I pull the thing out. I go like this, 150 pages or something. It opens to my mantra. There are hundreds of mantras in this book. It opens to mine. My heart fell into my kishkas. It said, Hindu deity, goddess of the earth. So now for 4 years, I've been praying to a Hindu deity. I flipped out. This is when I was starting to become religious. My heart fell in there. I said, I got to stop this. I couldn't stop it. It was neuroplasticity. We talked about every time you repeatedly do something, you repeatedly do that dialogue process. It starts happening in day-to-day life. Well, this was a leaky faucet, and it kept dripping and dripping and dripping. I went back to Minnesota another time. I said, what do I do with this? He said, memorize the Rebbe's 12 verses for young soldiers, the psukim for Tzavos Hashem. Memorize them, and when the mantra comes in, start saying those words. And that's what I did. That's how I got rid of the mantra.
But let's say it is. Let's say it is a Hindu deity. Is that a personal discomfort, or is there something wrong with it?
There's something wrong with it halachically.
Which
you
is?
You shouldn't be mentioning the name of another deity.
So I'm thinking, I was always told growing up.
We're not really supposed to mention the person whom the Christians. How many times do you say that?
Well, it's in the word Christian.
Exactly. Well, but the word, if you look up that word, it means Messiah.
Right. Right. So I understand that, but there could be not mentioning it, and there's something wrong with mentioning it, meaning it's a personal preference.
So
let me give you an example, right? So I was told growing up all the time that the Rebbe said, we don't believe in horoscopes, not because we don't believe in astrology, right? The Torah is filled with astrologers not filled with, but certainly the beginning stories filled with astrologers making predictions and interpreting dreams and everything else.
Pharaoh and his astrologers and everything. Yes.
But what we said was, what is it? Jews mazale gavra, I think.
So it's exactly. So there are two phrases I think you're referring to, and I believe we'll say it's from the Gemara. Who's going to refute me over here? I believe one says that the person's mazel is strengthened on their birthday, on special occasions. The other thing says, Ein Mazal Yisrael.
Exactly.
The Jewish people are not bound by the mazalot, by the influx of that spiritual energy that comes into the world, but they have an effect. So the tides have an effect. The sun has an effect. The planets have their interplanetary effect.
Sure.
There's the music of the spheres. I mean, that's very mystical. It's all electricity, right? But if the horoscope says, don't go outside today, you might slip on a banana peel. I mean, I just made that up, but you don't follow that. You intentionally make sure that you do things to prevent such a thing. You don't just listen to something and assume that it's going to be taking you over.
1 second. Okay, so I get that, but let me go to a different
we're not
term that was so said. Let's say about
bound
Ayin Hara. Okay, so this one's not bound. You're saying we're not bound, but we are influenced by.
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you another one with Ayin Hara, right? With the evil eye, which amongst Sephardic Jews, my mom is Sephardic, my dad is
I know
Ashkenaz.
Mama Shula.
So from that influence, right? Ayin Hara is very heavy, right? The evil eye. We have to prevent against it. We have to have chamtas at the door.
That's very, let's say, Middle Eastern influence, like even Arab nations also have that thing, Hamsa, the evil eye. Yeah.
Right. And what I've always heard from the Rebbe is
the Rebbe says if you don't believe in it, it doesn't affect you.
Okay, so why can't we say the same thing about a Hindu deity? We don't believe in it. Like, what's the difference? Why is it so important?
So in other words, I could still say that mantra over and over and over, but I don't believe in that deity, so it doesn't matter.
Maybe, okay, so now you don't want to, right? You choose not to, and you have another way of arriving at the same
once
destination.
I read that thing, my heart fell in my stomach. I felt bad, but I knew that there was a halachic problem. I've spoken to the Rav about it. There's a halachic, there's a legal Jewish problem
with saying
using these sacred languages that are not our own.
Okay. Right. I mean, I'm trying
and other elements, like for instance, the word mindfulness.
Yes.
So I once got really busted by a rabbi friend of mine for using the word in my things that I would post. If you type in the word mindfulness into, let's say, Wikipedia, probably the 7th or 8th word is going to say Buddhism.
Right.
The word mindfulness in English, you could consider it neutral. It means I'm aware, I'm present, I'm sensitive to what's going on, I'm noticing things.
Yes.
I'm not mindless, right? Mindfulness, you would say, but there's a whole philosophy behind this word. It's not just being aware. And it's based on Buddhist philosophy. And the word that they're translating is sati, a Pali word that refers to the whole experience. It's not just being present and aware. So I changed my vocabulary. I can use the word mindfulness to say that I don't use the word mindfulness, but I use the word mindful awareness, paying attention, being in the moment, being in the present moment, right? because
not necessarily that there's something wrong with it, but that. Okay, so let's take yoga for example, right? Yoga comes from where?
So yoga's a Hindu-based thing. It comes from Ayurveda, which is many systems of healing. So acupuncture and right, all of these things come from Ayurvedic. There's Ayurvedic herbs
Correct,
that
yes.
are used, right? And there are philosophies, and there's breathing, controlled breathing, and there's yoga. So these are all Ayurvedic. They all come from Hindu tradition.
So would you not use the word yoga? Would you not go to a yoga class?
So that's a really good question. I won't. I've got colleagues who do. I've got a colleague, she's famous with us, Simon Jacobson, gave approbation to her book, Wrestling with Yoga. This is Shelley Denby. She actually was on an ashram, and he said, because people want yoga, you're permitted to use it to attract people to do it. But she uses very neutralized, very parav discussion, language. There's no Hinduism. There's no Sanskrit. There's no namaste. There's no bowing. There's no Buddhist symbols or anything around in the studio. So I've attended her things. I don't call it yoga. I use a different word. Do you remember the expression klipas noga?
Yes.
Do you remember what it refers to?
Yeah, things that are can go either way. Neutral.
They could go either way. Neutral. They're parav, right?
Right.
So it's not something that's illegal and treif, not kosher.
Right.
And it's not something that's
Holy.
an actual mitzvah.
Yeah.
Right? So like this table, these microphones, this conversation is becoming holy, even if we don't say Torah words necessarily, because we're elevating this machinery. So Noga is what's neutral that can be elevated to a good source. So I call the movement, when I have a retreat and bring a movement specialist, we call it Noga. Not yoga, and klipas Noga.
So yoga is.
I have a brand. I have actually, it just got renewed. I have a copyright, a patent on this brand called Noga, Wellness Solutions.
So yoga is no-go.
I'm not going to tell you what to say and what to do, but for myself, and you know what? I've had a few people. There's a colleague of mine down here in Florida that I met at the Nefesh conference a couple weeks ago, and he did a thing on kosher mindfulness. I said, I have a problem with the title, but the concepts are wonderful. It was all about the Tanya. It was Tanya. So everybody has to live their own life. Because I'm a therapist and a Lubavitcher, and I had that meditation experience that was treif when I grew up, I have an obligation to follow the strict whatever the Rebbe's request was. And so that's why I ask Rabbi Greenberg and Rabbi Ullman when I have questions. Rabbi Ullman told me, you talked about healing modalities. You've probably heard of singing bowls, right?
Sound bowls, yeah. The
singing bowls, right. So some are made of metal and some are made of crystal quartz. Mm-hmm. The metal ones have been used by Buddhists for many hundreds of years.
They call them like Tibetan bowls.
Tibetan Buddhists to begin, and there are chimes and there are gongs and there are tingsha symbols. And many of these are used to introduce and to end a meditation. Gong, okay, right? And then gong, you're done.
Right.
So a Jew, or even a monotheistic Christian or Muslim, is not allowed to use that gong that begins and ends a meditation because it's the way of Buddhist meditation. So when I had to work out, so I'm composing scripts that this Rav is giving a hechsher to, giving a stamp of approval. So what do? I say, to introduce it, I don't need a gong. So we can use those things for other things, but not to begin and end a meditation, right? So here's the first premise. That's their custom. You're not allowed to follow their custom. They begin and end their meditation. Yes, you're allowed to meditate. don't begin and end it with one of these sounds. Okay? So how do I start it? I say, now, Ellie, sitting comfortably in a relaxed position, close your eyes. That's the intro. The outro, the extro, the out is, and now when I count to 3, you can open your eyes. I don't need the gong. Okay.
But you may use it during the...
Okay, so now comes another question. I told him, singing bowls are actually therapeutic. They have a resonance, a vibration that's very beautiful.
Yeah, we had someone on the podcast. His name is Yochi Ress. His moniker, he calls himself a Hasidelic Jew. And he's a musician who works with...
I missed that episode.
Yeah, I'll share it with you. It's a great episode. Really, really, really nice. And at the end, he came here with a bunch of bowls.
And were they metal or
They were metal
quartz?
bowls. And he had a bunch of different sounds. I sat in a sound healing with him as well.
Okay, I don't want to get him in trouble. But...
he didn't begin and end with it. That's... Okay, so let's go.
So here's the next level of this question that I asked the Rav.
Oh, so the point I was making is that he shared different stuff with us. For example, he filled water in the bowls.
Yes.
And then as he moved it,
he showed
what the water did.
It was making these
he had the bowls
like concentric circles.
Yeah. Right, just this ideas you're sharing about it being therapeutic.
But they vibrate. So
exactly.
Each pitch, the higher the pitch, the higher in the body. The lower the pitch, the lower, because your body is more dense and lower, and your body is 75% liquid water. So water vibrates. You saw.
Yeah, that's what he was showing us.
You saw the concentric circles. As
he had it popping also.
Popping up. Yeah. I put pine cones in it, and they dance.
Oh,
they dance around. You'll have to come to Buffalo. Next time you come to Buffalo, let me know you're in town. Just joking. I don't see you coming to Buffalo. But I'm not allowed to travel with my bowls on the airplane because of the pitch. It could crack the bowls. Okay.
So you use crystal bowls.
I use crystal quartz bowls. So this is what the Rav said. Do not use metal bowls. And I could tell you, right now, I could tell you at least 3 or 4 reasons. 1, you don't know where they came from. They're Tibetan bowls. So did they come from Tibet or India? B, you don't know if anybody intoned in them. Who sang in them? Who chanted in them? What did they chant? It could be a used bowl. 3, this is what they use. 4, there's a special, have you ever heard of alloys? Do you know what an alloy is? It's a combination of metals.
Okay.
They use a combination of metals that's mystical, like the 7 planets, 7 metals. So they use mystical ideas to create these bowls originally. Now, some could be simply brass, some could be simply another, but we don't know.
So,
and last but not least, right? It is used for religious ceremonial purposes. So, the Rav told me not to begin and end a meditation and to only use crystal quartz bowls because they're not that alloy. There's nothing mystical. And I need to purchase a brand new bowl. No one can have owned it. There can be no provenance before me because we don't know what they did with it. So let's say it's a crystal quartz bowl, but a Buddhist likes crystal quartz and chanted in it. So you talked about energies. So if you really believe that plants have energy and the solar system has energy and the universe has energy, so if someone intoned in my bowl and I've got it, it may influence me. I know it sounds very bizarre and strange, but
right, I guess the question
is... It's mystical. It's a mystical thing.
Right, I guess the question is to what lens one goes. You know, when you're talking about a mantra, right, then you can find another one.
Correct. Right. And you can use a word or a nonsense word. Anything will work. When
you take an example, let's say, of a bowl, so you're saying, oh, I have a crystal bowl, but let's say you didn't. And let's say there's an individual here
I threw out a couple metal bowls before I found out when I found
No, I'm saying, but let's say you didn't have, let's say crystal bowls didn't exist.
Okay.
And the only thing that there was these metal bowls.
I would find an alternative. Okay.
And there was this individual there who needed this healing in some way. I mean, it
so in
seems
other words,
so excessive.
give them treif to heal with the singing bowls.
Yeah, it may not be the right example.
Hashem, God has created such an abundance of healing modalities. We will find a kosher methodology for that person. I can tell you, I'm only speaking for me, Eli, because I'm a Lubavitcher and I love the Rebbe, and I'm a therapist for many years, and I'm into the holistic and integrative approach, and I once touched idolatrous stuff and it burnt me.
Right, so saying these are your practices for yourself.
That's why I do this. I'm not telling Shelley she can't call her thing yoga. And I'm not telling this rabbi he can't call his thing mindfulness. That's not my avoda, my job.
Right.
Mine is I need to be as clean and clear because I'm asking questions. And people call me.
Right.
People call me at least once a month about a yoga studio. They had gone for a while and they never saw this thing and now they heard or saw this thing, or is this music okay, or is this... People ask me about apps all the time. There's some, you can go into one level
Insight
of an app.
Timer or whatever, yeah.
Insight Timer is all metal bowls, metal singing bowls.
No, they're not. It's recordings of metal singing bowls.
Okay, so it's one step removed. You can ask your rabbi,
Right.
But I don't recommend Insight Timer to anyone. And I created an app. It's not very sophisticated because,
Right.
But I created a breathing and meditation app that's 100% kosher because it was under my auspices. When someone says, do you know if this app is okay? I'm not going to audit an app and spend hours going into levels
right,
and
just
levels
make your own.
and levels
Okay.
to find out if it's okay. If you bump into... I have people who say, I went to the third level and I bumped into a this and a that. Is it okay?
Okay, so I like what you're doing, meaning...
What I'm saying is for me and
Right.
my work, if someone says, is there a kosher app? I needed to create one.
Right.
A kosher meditation? I needed to create it.
Okay, meaning you have no issue with, like you said, the rabbi who calls mindfulness or anything else.
I can't
But
tell anybody how to...
if someone wants, I want it to be kosher for sure, then you say, okay, I've researched it, I've checked it,
Exactly.
I've tripped up on these things, I know the pitfalls,
Right.
I know what to
and
look
I
for.
speak to the Rav. And, the other thing is, let's say 97% of my clients are Lubavitchers. They're Chabad. Many of them are Shluchim and Shluchos, emissaries of the Rebbe. I need to be very careful for them. They have programs. I had a Rebbetzin call me. They were going to have this woman use singing bowls. Hers were quartz. So I spoke to her about it. Another person said they're teaching mindfulness in the school. I said, okay, do you want to meet with me, with the principal and this lady? Let's just make sure. So I'm a consultant for schools, for Batei Chabad, because Rav Ullman has sent people to me as well.
Right.
Because he knows now this is my... Other people are not so strict about it, but I have to be, I feel.
Right, you're recognizing that you're strict and you're catering to the type of person.
A particular type of person. And Rabbi Greenberg, Dad's friend, says this is my shlichus because of what I went through, because I'm a therapist, because I'm a Lubavitcher, because I've gotten involved in it and developed these things. This is my... the Rebbe spoke about this.
I saw a talk on transcendental meditation, which he shared, and a lot of people, a little while ago, Jem started putting out these clips.
Yes, did you see the short video of the Rebbe speaking about TM?
Yes, I saw it. And people were putting out clips, and they seem to be putting out the clips as a way to bash some of what was going on, right? With maybe perhaps plant medicines or some other stuff. But I listened to the whole clip, and I took out something very different. I didn't hear the Rebbe bash anyone who was using it.
No.
I heard him instruct people, make it kosher.
Yes,
and what
absolutely.
he said was, make it kosher, offer a kosher alternative,
and they will come
and if
to
it's as good, they will come.
Yeah.
I don't know if he said it's as good, but if it's a kosher alternative,
yes.
the sustenance there, then they will come.
And you know what? I have people who are relieved. because they don't know the source of what they've been doing. And when they find these things out, they're relieved that there's a kosher alternative. I've got dozens of meditations, dozens of relaxation, dozens of sleep recordings. You know, you should be somewhat satisfied. If let's say I had more resources, I'd have my engineer come to me once a week and we would record more.
And record more. What's the name of your app for those who are interested?
Noga Wellness Solutions.
Noga.
Noga.
Wellness.
The
Wellness.
Noga app.
I love it. Okay, so you recognize that you're catering to a specific
Yes, and I don't tell people how to do their own mindfulness or meditation or whatever.
Right. And I believe in that same video of not the short videos that Jem put out of the Rebbe speaking, but the longer one that's online, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, where the full topic is the Rebbe quotes a Gemara, I think, that says,
just because people worship the sun and the moon,
should God destroy his world?
Should we destroy that? Yeah, exactly.
Because of sun worshippers or moon worshippers. Exactly.
The fools who are worshiping it. Exactly.
Right.
So the Rebbe's, what was the parallel? Just because some people are meditating with mantra, like TM, right? Or using idolatrous elements, offerings, incense, etc.,
Yes.
It doesn't mean that that's the methodology is problematic. You don't throw the whole thing out. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Meditation is helpful.
So why wouldn't you say the same thing about the bowls?
About the singing bowls?
Yeah, if they have therapeutic benefit.
Oh, so that's exactly what the Rebbe said. Make sure that they don't have the idolatrous elements. So I spoke to Rabbi Ullman. My crystal quartz bowls, I have 3 of them. One at a time, because they're like a used car. They're very expensive.
Yeah.
But I called the warehouse and I said, could you go down to the shelves and take an F bowl and go play a couple F bowls? And I picked a brand new quartz bowl from the warehouse. And then an A and then a C. I've got 3 bowls that are stunning pitch. They're very well tuned. And they're healing. They're wonderful. I chant in them. I do my own little thingy at night, sometimes just to get a buzz and kind of like chill out, right? And sometimes I do it for people.
Right. So let me give you the other side, and maybe you recognize the same concern that I do, and this is what you're addressing, or maybe you don't recognize it at all. So I want to bring it up to you. So I see very often, people who are in desperate need of healing. I meet a lot of them. I talk to them. They reach out to me based on, this podcast and other things I've done over the years. And then sometimes when a modality is put in front of them, no matter what they're doing in their life, no matter what's going on, they all of a sudden throw their hands up and they want to know where the metal alloys are made, right? And I respect your search, right? That you're going out there, you're at a place in your life.
Mine is a very specific, because I believe I do have the shlichus. The Rebbe spoke about this close to 50 years ago. No one did anything. Only one colleague of mine made an attempt. And his stuff is really nice, but he's not into it.
Right.
He's busy as a rabbi.
I respect it and it's beautiful, but I want to know what you say to that individual. So I'll give you an example of a story. I have a guy call me. I believe he was referred to me by a rabbi, and he was struggling in his marriage with infidelity. And as I was talking to him, I realized there was like, I want to say no open doors. We only spoke like 45 minutes, but the risks he was taking were so extreme, and with his marriage, with his community, with
his life,
with everything, and not only himself. He wasn't only. He was dragging all his kids, his community. The risks were very extreme. Like if what he was doing was known to a larger audience, it could have had a ripple effect,
a horrible effect
on many other people. And I was trying to point this out to him, and what he seemed to be calling me about was not actually what he was doing, was the obsession. Like, can I do this without the obsession? Like, why can I not stop thinking about it? That seemed to be where he was at. And I was like, that's not the question.
This was an addiction that he had?
He didn't see it as an addiction. He just wanted to know why the thoughts were taking over his life, and he almost went to...
Sounds a little OCD.
Exactly. But he also sounded like he was taking some big risks, and he was hiding an addiction. And when I saw the level of risks and everything else, at this point in time, I was newer to the plant medicine world, but I said, hey, I think this can help you. Obviously you have to do your own research and everything else, but...
Was it helpful to him?
No. So what I was thinking was, okay, this guy is so resistant, maybe get him 5 grams of mushrooms into his system and see what happens. and maybe a truth will wake up.
What's wrong with mushrooms?
Sure. So you know what his response to me was?
What?
But is it avodah zarah? Like, how do I know this is okay?
Because people don't know.
And I said, listen, I get your question. Research it if you could. But have you checked with the rabbi on your infidelity? Have you checked with the rabbi?
Exactly. So, you're worried about this detail, right? And
suddenly
your life
when there's
is burning apart.
Right. Suddenly there's a potential for healing. You got guys going to...
Well, people do this all the time. This is part of denial.
Right, exactly.
Right? I might be harming my whole family, but I'm worried about speaking Lashon Hora in shul between 4 and 5 before Mariv or whatever.
Okay, so what will people say? Well, in this case, the guy didn't have a great response because he was engaging in one of the other 3 things that we say we die for, right? But the response,
it's big like
right?
That,
but the response will often be
sometimes it's life. You've got
right.
to
But the response will often be well, it says about avodah zarah, right? That even if it's helpful to us, even if it can save our life, we shouldn't engage in it, right? And so what I respond, and I'm curious what you think.
But I don't see how that would be avodah zarah. There are rituals that are based in religions and cultures that are not our own that could have some concern about them.
Right.
But if you've got, let's say, a safe facilitator, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a therapist, helping them, they're eating a kosher food item and they're using God's Noga, God's...
Sure, but that's not accessible to everyone.
Correct.
Sometimes someone has this, hey, I know this person, it's not as if like a mushroom facilitator outside of Oregon can sit there and post, this is what I do. Right. So, so you have this individual and maybe...
Not everybody has access.
Exactly.
Not everybody will want to. Not everybody...
No, but here's a solution that can be provided to this guy. Like in this case, I said, listen, I know a gentleman in Costa Rica who you can fly out there to, and he offers, a
few days taking care of
plant medicine and everything else. And... I had that session.
Person needs
He's
to
not
do
someone
his own
who is
research.
Of course he has to do his own research. I want to know what you say to the thought, because what I'm concerned about is someone hearing this and saying, okay, I have something that's healing me. I have something that's great, but how do I know that the metal alloys in the crystal bowls that are healing me are
they wouldn't be
okay?
Crystal, they'd be metal bowls. But
whatever. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So certainly we do not know many of these things.
Is it avodah zarah? Is that what you're saying is avodah zarah, or just something I don't want to do? It's not okay. But
I'm not going to make a halachic determination for the world at large.
Okay.
Okay. There are a lot of people, a lot of approaches. I'm telling you now a second time. This is me. I'm very strict because my Rav told me it's my shlichus to make sure everything is according to him or the Rav's.
Mahadran mean Mahadran.
Yes, because
the highest
I'm
level of
working
kosher.
With let me just say, in response to your previous question, many people are very naive. Okay? If they were explained it, they'd say, oh, that's not avodah zarah. Or they'd say, oh, that is avodah. But they're naive and they don't know. And they don't know how to ask. And they don't know whom to ask. And that's why you get a crazy response like that. Now, the guy could be in denial also. He could be, I don't want to heal. So if you're going to give me something that sounds funky, I'm just going to avoid it. Right? But it could be the same thing with anybody who's denying going to an AA meeting. I don't need it. I'm going to be fine, right? It could be denial. Or it could be just plain ignorance. Honestly, I think not every facet of the religious community is fully educated in a way that's satisfying to all of the members. I'm going to keep it as spoken neutrally as possible. So many of us are ignorant. We don't know basic laws, right? If you know basic laws, you can determine whether you just trafed a fork up or not. You don't need to call a Rav for every little thing.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying? So I think we're naive about these things. And I think we were afraid, and I say we, I wasn't part of the institution, but we were afraid to educate our students. And now more is coming out as now they're adults. And now they don't know their way in certain ways. And That's to me, I would hope it's just an ignorant question and not a belligerent one. Meaning, I don't want to heal. Don't offer me mushrooms. I don't want to heal.
Right. In this case, the guy actually did.
He did.
He did end up doing it. I was just giving an example
Did
of
it
kind
heal
of.
him? Was he helped with it?
It gave him a level of clarity. When I haven't spoken to him in a while, but
He's not as
immediately
obsessive
afterwards, well, immediately afterwards, he and I spoke, and he recognized that as a child he went through very extreme sexual abuse, and that he needed to work on that and focus on that. And I think that put into better context.
Things up,
yes,
and it might make him safer for the other people in his life once he had that opening. I believe in.
I was more interested in his first thought, like that defense mechanism.
The first thought could be either absolute ignorance, I'm an idiot, or I'm a scaredy cat and I don't want to heal.
But it's the most common one I hear. When
I believe you.
I
believe you. You know why? Because we have not been educated.
Related to healing, meaning you're approaching this from the standpoint of, okay, I want to bring healing to these people. I saw how meditation saved me in high school, and how can I get this
to the masses in a kosher way?
In a kosher way.
And it's not just that, because I didn't do guided imageries and I didn't do sleep relaxation.
Right,
audios.
But you're not saying how can I avoid it because it's not kosher.
No.
Exactly.
On the contrary, this is what the Rebbe's request is. Find a kosher alternative so more people can do it in a proper way.
Right. Remember the whole controversy around Call the Shofar?
I do.
Do you have thoughts about it?
I do.
Okay, let's go there.
Do you want to hear them?
I'd love to hear them,
okay.
Yeah.
Mixed feelings, because I know that there were some things that were beneficial. I have friends who went and colleagues who went. Anybody who was relatively healthy who went did okay. But they did not have a professional in the men's program. I think she was a professional in the women, his wife, or had a professional there. There was no medical or mental health professional in the men's program, ever. There was fallout. There were people who were exposed to things that they were not capable of dealing with, floor work or whatever they needed to do to expose and become vulnerable and share their privacy. Some people are not equipped. They needed to screen people for health and safety.
Okay,
really.
so that's the
I'm talking
from the
as
clinical
a mental
standpoint.
health clinical perspective. Then from the next level of the clinical perspective, I got fallout. I had marital things come up. Some people say, "Oh, it was great for our marriage." Some people said it destroyed our marriage. Now, again,
sometimes marriages have to be destroyed.
Well, that's true, but not good ones.
Right.
Not ones that you see are viable and that they had to pick up a lot of pieces over the next many months.
Right,
they cleaned it up. But this happened a few times, and then a few individuals. One person had a psychotic break, and a therapist asked me about this person. They weren't equipped. They needed a professional screening people. Hey, when you go to the exercise place, if you went to Gold's Gym or Fitness 19, they would have you fill out a form. Do you have heart problems? Do you have blood pressure? Right? They're going to weigh you. They're going to check you out. Are you allowed to do this? This is no different.
Got it. Okay, so that's on the clinical side.
On the clinical side.
On the clinical side. What about the controversy around the...
So I think part of the controversy, I don't know if it was idolatry that they were concerned about. Maybe they were. I could only see it from a clinical perspective. I know Rafi Aaron was consulted and Rabbi Ullman was consulted, and I know Shia Hecht had his voice in there and everything. And I know there were some rabbis upset because they sent people and then they felt bad, and there was some fallout for their people. I think it could be a nice idea. I think it shouldn't be one person who's a non-clinician doing his own thing and exposing it to a lot of people. I think maybe people need advisory boards, maybe a rabbi and a professional and the person whose idea it was in the first place. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
For safety, that's all. I think the idea sounded great. Some of the people who went and had a good time and really enjoyed it and felt benefit from it told me they sounded like great exercises, but not everybody can do those things.
Right. Some of the names you mentioned, I had quasi run-ins with Mic Drop when I did that, which is a public speaking program, an opportunity for people to speak.
I remember that.
Right. And it created a lot of controversy. The gentleman you mentioned in Australia, Aaron, I mean, he wrote an article about us without ever calling me or the other gentleman, which I thought
Never speaking to you about it?
Never speaking to me. And what was interesting is I criticized him online.
Were you the one that developed that mic drop a few years ago?
What happened? I was involved in it, yeah. So what happened is that, it was myself and this guy, Rosh Lowe. So what happened is that I had done a talk at a charity dinner for Lamplighters Yeshiva in Crown Heights.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the very first time I spoke. I was looking to overcome my fear of public speaking. I thought it would be useful to me. And shortly thereafter, I just started the 12 steps. I was working on the addiction.
You're saying for yourself?
For myself. I was working on an addiction to pornography and other things sexual related. And about a year and a half into that program, into the 12-step program, something I've been working on for 4 or 5 years came to fruition. And that was to meet with the individual who sexually abused me. And I had a meeting with me, him, and the therapist.
Wow.
So
he was willing?
He wasn't willing. He was forced to by JCW. Or he felt forced to by JCW.
Okay, good.
So so a few things came together. Was one, I was working on my public speaking. I wanted to do this. The second is I had an experience of being able to confront the guy who abused me.
Yeah.
It was
probably mind-blowing.
Crazy. More powerful than almost any day of my life, more healing. And what was most powerful was that, when I imagine there are many factors in sexual abuse, but one of it is this feeling of feeling weaker than this other person.
Right.
And in this moment, I was able to reclaim my power.
You were the strong one there.
Exactly. And one of the ways that showed up was actually physically. Today I'm much larger than he is, but at the time he was larger than me, obviously.
Than you.
Yeah. But when I sat down in the room with him, physically, I still thought he was bigger. And it wasn't until the end of the 3-hour session that I realized
he was psychological memory, that cellular memory inside of you that felt like I'm a little boy here.
Correct. And I left the meeting, instead of saying, oh, here is this powerful person who overpowered me, I said, here's this pathetic, poor person. And I said, his memories are worse than mine. I'd much rather my memories of being abused than him having to deal with,
legal things, his own family, his own.
There was the statute of limitations in New York was over, so he didn't have to deal with it. It had already passed, so he didn't have to deal with that. But his family had known, and I actually, in the meeting, I actually affected him deeply.
Wow.
When he heard what I said, when he heard the way it affected me, he was minimizing, he was hiding things, and in there he was confronted with the truth. He actually started shaking and hyperventilating.
Wow, I believe it.
Yeah, I stepped out of the meeting because for about a half hour, the therapist had to treat him. He couldn't breathe. And when he finally caught his breath, he turned to the therapist and said, am I a monster? Can I go back home to my kids?
Wow.
So it changed my whole view of him. And I had known other people.
He became a victim himself, a pathetic victim.
That's the way I saw him. And I felt like I tasted a slice of chocolate cake that very few people in the world get to taste. To be able to turn the tables on someone who sexually abused me. And I wanted to share this with.
Amazing.
I was like, I needed to share this.
Sure.
So I wasn't so happy with the first speech I gave. And there was this gentleman who I knew, Rosh Lowe. Rosh Lowe was a news reporter, an Orthodox Jew in Florida. He had covered a break-in that I had at my office because we sell electronics. And I'd known him a little bit from the shul. So I reached out to him and said, hey, would you train me for a talk?
Wow.
So we did an event in Miami Beach. We hosted in the JLC. This was in 2014 approximately. And it was just an awareness event on child sex abuse. It really hit the community hard. And we just started kind of traveling events. So we did it in Pittsburgh, which you had mentioned. We did it in Toronto. We did it in California. We did it in Cleveland. We did it in New York in a couple different locations, Crown Heights, Muncie. There were some that went to Israel. I didn't join those, but we started doing it all over awareness events, and it was very powerful, those events and that speaking. Separate from that, as I saw the changes in me, I asked Rosh, come to my company. Let's do this for our staff.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's teach people.
Oh, my goodness.
And we had an event where we rented a theater in Aventura, and about 15 or so of the employees got up and gave a speech.
Wow.
And I saw and it was
Like
all
a mic
personal
drop,
story.
like a mic drop.
That's where mic drop started.
Okay.
And I saw the transitions that people had in their work environment. I saw the team building and camaraderie.
And the transformation.
The transformation for them. And then there were stories that I had worked side by side with people. I had not known their stories.
You didn't know them.
How am I supposed to know? We had a controller there who I had noticed when she came in. She was a pretty woman, but she had some like marks, not
facial
and she had
deformity or something.
Something on her face, some skin stuff. And in her story, what happened was she was like a beauty pageant winner, like 18 or 19 or 20 years old in whichever country she was from. And when in her young 20s, like that was her life. She was a model. She went in that direction. In her 20s, a pot exploded on her stove. She was cooking something, and it covered half her face in burns. So in addition to the physical things she had to deal with, the physical challenges, she also had now an identity crisis. She could no longer be
my whole life
model.
Is different.
She pivoted and changed.
Became a
controller and was very successful in that and doing all sorts of stuff in charity work and helping people. Like, what a cool story. And here was someone I was working with for a few years.
Yeah, I didn't even know her.
Right, I didn't know the story. This is like
it's crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So after that, I told Rosh, I'm like, you got to bring this out to more and more companies. This thing's amazing. So I helped him get to a few companies. And then I said, let's...
You're transforming companies.
So I helped him get to a few companies and then said, Rosh, why don't you do this full time? There's a million news reporters. You got a gift. I'll help you. I'll seed the business. You'll leave. And we started doing this. And that's where Mic Drop was formed. And he was doing some events in the company and companies. And then he did one in Crown Heights for a company. I remember the founder of the company. His name was Truly Richler. Did it in Crown Heights and shared different stories. And a lot of people became interested. Hey, I want to share my story too. I want to share my story too. We developed like a workbook,
Fabulous.
How to get to the story and everything else. And somehow, to some hammers, everything is a nail. So
why? Because it was immodest for women to speak public?
What they jumped on. That's what they jumped on.
I have some recollection of that.
That's what women standing up and speaking in public. It's a form of vulnerability. It's nakedness.
But our Rebbe empowered his women.
It was very bizarre.
Right? I mean, the Rebbe sent women all over the place to teach and bring and create and make.
Yeah, it was very, very, very bizarre what happened. And then this letter comes, COL Live had done she had done a talk
so you got
about her own journey. There was crazy pressure coming
I don't get it.
way.
Okay.
And this guy, Aaron, who you mentioned, wrote a... I reviewed their workbook, and they don't follow HIPAA laws, and they don't and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, this workbook is not for us. It's a prompt for the own person to write and answer questions.
Why would it have to do with HIPAA? Are you a medical company?
I know, it just made no sense.
Are you a social worker?
Yeah, it made no sense. Because the point of a mic drop was to uncover someone's message, which came from their personal story.
An internal. Like
what are the dangers? What are the dangers if someone shares their story in public, is embarrassed? They don't start by sharing their story in public. There's workshops.
Were they afraid that, let's say, a girl exposes herself, maybe she won't find a husband?
I'll tell you what they were afraid of. And this was a legitimate fear, but they didn't say it clearly.
Okay.
So they got in all these things, which was a legitimate fear, and I agree with, is that there was a fad brewing, and it was, let me share my story in public. And the purpose of Mic Drop was to share a resolution, a lesson, a message.
A good thing. You weren't like, just see me, it wasn't just a see me, kind of thing.
It was, the Mic Drop, the formula was, what's your message for the world, right? So, for example, a message that I may have for the world.
Like something?
Yeah, a message I may have for the world is, we can heal from anything. And let me tell you my story. And then I can tell you my whole story being sexually abused. I'm not here to out a sexual abuser. I'm not here to be... performative. I'm not here to be sensational.
Sounds like the same approach of the Rebbe.
I'm here to say my story.
We're not negating. We're augmenting. We're putting good things in.
Correct. But certain people were jumping onto like the gossip part of it. Who did it? This guy said he was abused in his home. Who are his parents, right? And a lot could have been surfaced very quickly.
To harm people in their marriages, in their households or whatever, if people find...
someone said a story about growing up without much food. You're embarrassing your father on stage. That wasn't her story. That wasn't what was going on. So people started focusing on other things. But it was good because there are not enough therapists in Brooklyn to deal with the trauma in Crown Heights. So for it all to come out in one, like in 3 months would have been too much. So I'm glad it came down. But I'm just saying some of the names you mentioned.
Are challenging in some way.
Yes,
for you.
Or I may just have a bias from my own personal experience, and they may have been completely right and called the chauffeur.
You're a renegade. You're doing new and different things. You're doing things that, it takes a while to open people up to things. 30 years ago, people didn't go for therapy.
Oh, 100%. When I started going to therapy, more now, but a little more than 15 years ago, I guess it's 20 years by now.
Yeah.
I was hiding it.
When I started it in Crown Heights, people thought I was crazy. Oh, you'll never get any clients. But I did. But they would be very careful, I walk around a block and walk in, and is your entrance on the first floor? And right, people were very insecure about it. Now all of my stuff is.
Now it's weird not to have a therapist.
It is weird not to have a therapist because the world is messed up.
Okay,
we're all
so
anxious.
Let me go back to call the chauffeur where you were. I just wanted to put that aside, that maybe I have a bias or maybe I have actual experience with individuals.
I think both, maybe. Right. A little of both.
My question is this with Call the Chauffeur. Do you feel like the Rebbe's guidance as it relates to healing was followed in the way Call of the Chauffeur was handled?
No. I don't think we're doing that much of anything.
In the way Call the Chauffeur was shut down, not in the way.
Okay, so honestly, I don't think we've got... I don't want to get in trouble here. I'm going to have people say, what? You said that on... I'm not sure if we've got the ideal guidance and support and leadership and supervision in our community. And the tail follows the head. So we're going to either help people or upset people by what happens on top. If it's Rabbanim and rabbis and community leaders who get into this hoo-ha and get upset, so then community at large people who are ignorant are going to go over there, even if some elements are good. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that happens a lot. And I think that's why a few minutes ago you asked the story about this person. Is it treif? Is it kosher? Is it avodah zarah? Is it idolatrous? Because there is that hoo-ha. The community will go up in arms about something instead of investigating and pulling people together and asking, why are you doing this? Is there a reason, if there were communication and people were open to learning, I think these things would not happen as frequently.
Right. I should say it as well that the letter from the Beis Din about mic drop did not come with a call to discuss it with us or Rosh. And what was disappointing was that for Rosh, it was his primary
a letter went out and it didn't go to him?
A letter went out about the event, that this event isn't okay, or like that affected his business. But you would think before Beis Din writing a letter that they would call Rosh Low.
Let him know that this is...
For him, it was his business. For me, I was seating it.
So when you ask, is this the way of the Rebbe? It clearly is not.
I'm talking about the call of the chauffeur. So what I want... So that's my question.
The way these things are shut down or spoken about or a big... I think there needs to be less ignorance and more attentiveness, and you need to ask all the parties who are involved to discuss it.
So I want to challenge you a little bit because you seem hesitant to say something, but at the same time, earlier in the conversation, you said that you feel like your shlichus is to do this specifically, all right? To
provide kosher, supportive, healing, and healthful services that I know have been halachically approved, or I already know that they're approvable.
Exactly. Okay, so based on that shlichus, right? Based on that deal, how do you think? Obviously, you can't take on everything, so sometimes the shlichus is influencing others.
And I sometimes refer them to other people or whatever.
No, but it could be influencing others who may do the same, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you have this healing modality that surfaced. I don't know what the modality is, but it was under the banner of Call of the Chauffeur.
Okay.
And
I think he took from different modalities.
Sure.
I think one was like a narrative therapy, and I think there were a lot of different things that he used there.
Right. So if whatever it was, right, many different things, the community decided, or rabbis decided, it's a big event, we have to shut this down. What is your message based on your shlichus to people if we are faced with something like this?
So, meaning ex post facto or in the midst of it?
Or there could be another one, right? There could be another one brewing right now.
So I'm all for collaboration. I have a couple shluchos who've asked me to help them with projects as a consultant. And I always tell them, make sure you've got one rabbi and one rebbitzin and one doctor and one lawyer and what, right? If we're making an organization, we need advice. It can't just be Hamish and me and Hamish and you, right? I believe we need to collaborate. And when something like this comes up in the community, that was going on for a long time. It wasn't a flash in the pan. I knew people were going for months and months. He had several of those. At the beginning, if people had questions, they needed to pull him in. They needed to discuss it with him. Rabbis, I think they waited too long. They talked in the background and then came out with a proclamation. I'm not saying the proclamation was wrong. I don't know exactly how everything came about. What I can say is when I'm privy to something, like I told you, a school asked me, what about this presentation? If I'm privy to it, please tell me about it. Let me help you. Let me make it in a kosher way.
Right.
If this man from Call the Shofar or his wife came to me, I'd say, come, let's do this clinically correct. You must have someone screening everybody who comes to this. You must have a clinical person there in case someone flips out. People flipped out there. And they didn't have a means of communicating with anybody. The phones were taken. Not everybody can handle the strict kind of setting, right?
So, what you had suggested there was collaborating and working with, right, to do it in a kosher way. And that's what I think that when I was looking at it, and I had no idea about Kol Shofar, I don't till this day, even though I did interview someone.
And when we say kosher, I'm not even sure what was not kosher other than people got hurt. Did they say
that's
that
the
there was
clinical side of stuff.
Idolatrous element?
I don't
remember.
The word I heard at the time was cult. It's a cult.
Okay. Well, that it could have satisfied the definition of a cult because you didn't know about it if you didn't know about it. It was not online. If you looked at online, you got a name, a contact, right? That there were secretive things that went on, et cetera. It's possible that it fits the definition of a cult. I don't remember anything about Avodah Zorah per se.
No, I remember the cult.
But again, so what would distinguish it from a cult would be you have a board of directors or you've got advisors and you've got people whom you're speaking to and it's open and there are articles about it and it's being explained and there's a brochure that you can read and there's somebody whom you can call to ask questions of. It wasn't like that.
Right. So
Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand exactly.
I believe in
But even so, let's say this guy,
transparency.
right. Let's say this guy was the worst thing since ever, right?
I don't believe he was.
Let's say he was, and what was the?
He was taking
Was it
advantage,
Marilyn Manson? Was that his name?
Okay.
Right.
Manson.
Right, the guy who led the
murder,
cult where everyone jumped off the.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah.
So let's say it was leading up to that, right? So they stopped
God
the great.
forbid.
Right. Let's say God forbid, right? It was the
They were
worst thing they
saving
stopped.
the world by
Okay.
stopping this thing
Yes,
happening.
let's say it was. They still didn't ask two important questions. Why are the people going? Why are the people? What are they looking for?
Exactly.
What
What's
are they looking
wrong
for?
with our
Exactly.
education or our therapeutic services that's not providing something to our people?
And the second is, how can we give it to them in a way that
In a
is
way that
acceptable
does
to us?
fit. Okay,
Exactly.
you got a problem with my work, so how can we make it work? So that's definitely up my alley. That's exactly what I do.
And that's what
schools or organizations consult with me. Can I use this person for my spa day? So they've got health days. Can she be the singing bowl lady? Can she be the meditation lady? Right. They'll consult with me. They'll pay me to consult with that person and verify that I vet people for them because what I learned from Rav Ullman and Rabbi Greenberg and many other rabbis in Sforim and
right, understood. Yeah, and that's what I think was missing was that if you're going to shut something down, then offer an alternative, and that was the message.
This is the
that was the
Rebbe's
message exactly. That's what was my point.
About the meditation. You can't shut something down without giving an alternative.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Right. That's what I think the central takeaway is. It's not about bashing something for a Avodah Zarah.
Exactly.
It's about asking, why are the people going? What are they looking for?
Honestly, some of my colleagues and I have a very big problem with people who are coaches who do therapy because they're not allowed. Their rules disallow them. Or
What does it mean a coach who does therapy?
so they overstep their boundary. They have not been trained in diagnosis and various other skills and assessment, etc. And they're doing therapy and charging like therapists, but they're not skilled. So we get fallout. We get people coming that they were either hurt or harmed or didn't get the help that they wanted. So there are people who take a course, a breathwork course, and then they go around teaching people breathwork. Well, some breathwork could be dangerous. I just took a class at Nefesh a couple weeks ago with my colleagues. It was holotropic breathwork. Fabulous stuff. It gives you a buzz. And my body was shaking, right? And I didn't even know if I could do it. I've read about it. It's a very fascinating thing.
It's amazing.
I stayed away from it until I had a practitioner to supervise me. Now, there are people who learn this who are not therapists or not doctors to know about safety and health and diagnoses and things like that, who could get hurt.
Well, they're breathwork therapists, right? They're going through a training program.
Right. So this breathwork therapist is also an LCSW. So she can deal with what happens in the session. Like, you heard people crying and screaming. And,
Oh, yeah, I've been in them. I've been those people.
right? And some people do well with it, and some people don't do well with it. And there needs to be a person to help them when they're not doing well. Same thing with the call of the shofar. There wasn't a therapist or a doctor there. There needed to be screening. The same thing with holotropic breathwork. She gave a lecture first. If you have this or this or this or this, heart problems or osteoporosis or various things, you cannot attend this workshop. Sign this. Did you sign a form that you
I've done many
waiver?
breathworks. I've never signed a waiver, no.
Never signed a waiver. Okay. Good luck. You're putting your breath in their hands. Anyway.
Right. I'm not sure how I feel about this.
We want to make sure that people are qualified to do what they're doing. Maybe I'm too strict and too closed for you.
No, listen, I hear what you're saying, and I understand those risks with certain people. I understand that.
Fallout.
Right. There's fallout on the other end. That's all I'm giving the other concern.
100%. And that's why I'm not against. Let's say that gentleman came to me and said, hey, look, we got shut down. How could we open this up again according to your Chabad community and according to therapeutic sense? I would help him start it back up, and we would make sure that we're under hashgacha, that there was haskama for it, and you'd have to change the name to protect the innocent.
Right. You may not like this, but one of the lines I say on there is that there are no mental health experts, and I'll tell you why I say this.
Okay.
Is imagine we said like we have building experts, but 80% of buildings were collapsing. So who would want to say I'm an expert?
Yes. Do you think
Right?
80% of people who go to therapists are not well?
No,
not being healed?
I'm not saying 80% of people that go to therapists.
Okay.
I'm saying that in the like we haven't got enough expertise around the problems in human psychology.
Correct.
Meaning, even if there could be a therapist who's very, very good, but 80% of people are struggling. That's what I'm saying.
There's too much going on.
There's too much.
For
So even
too
if
few people.
so even if there's an expert, okay, so give me an expertise that now can be rolled out to enough people that can deal with the problem.
Yes.
And not even talking about the people who don't want help. You can't do anything for someone who doesn't want help.
No, you can't lead a horse to
But
water.
right, there is expertise around. Right, let's say, but going back to building, there is expertise around building structures that last.
Yes, of course.
But if someone is not interested in following it,
Yes, exactly.
right, then there's
Well,
nothing
you
to do.
had
So I'm
that
not talking about
crazy
those.
building that fell.
Oh, sure, and there were many violations along the way, right? There
That
were many
they
things
knew
that were
about
ignored.
prior.
Correct. What I'm saying is that we can say there's expertise around this subject. I say it kind of tongue in cheek that with the amount of problems, like I would not want to call myself an expert. It's just too many problems, too many.
And you know what? It could be a huge liability for someone to take that responsibility without the license, the qualifications, the expertise and stuff. People do it every day.
So I've had a couple conversations on the kind of therapy versus coaching. And how long do we have? So we're not. We don't have.
Well, I have to be picked up at 8:00 in Hallandale.
Okay, so let's go 5 more minutes and
Okay.
we're good. We'll even keep this in. So I've had a couple conversations on therapy versus coaching. So I've worked with both.
I'm sure you
therapists
have. I'm sure you've worked with all
a lot.
sorts of types of people.
And literally at the same time. I mean, I'm not,
Sure.
for different reasons. And we've had several coaches sit in that chair and kind of explain from their position, why they can do what they do and why they charge what they charge. You said coaches who charge like therapists. I know some coaches who put therapists, like the prices I've heard from coaches. I spoke to a coach this week and I was talking about him and I said, like, how would it work? And he said, well, for a 3-month commitment to work with me 3 or maybe 4 times a month for an hour, guess how much he quoted?
3 months?
3 months, once a week. Let's say once a week.
$1,000.
$20,000.
Well,
A coach.
A coach.
A coach.
Ouch.
Ouch, yes.
And that hurts my colleagues. We went to school at least 6 years to
Right.
8 years to get a license. Then we are continually educated.
Right.
The course I'm giving next week has got CEUs, continuing education units for my colleagues.
Right, exactly. So that's what I was saying is that
I've
never heard of a therapist who charges
I haven't.
$1,500 an hour.
I haven't.
I haven't, but I've heard of coaches. So obviously not all coaches. There's some who charge a lot less. But what I'm saying is just we've had that side represented, meaning in terms of coaches. And like I said, I received
I like
benefit
coaches.
from
Some
both.
of my best friends are coaches. But they shouldn't be doing therapy.
Okay, so I want the other position, right, from a therapist, from a clinician, from someone who's trained. I want that side represented because we've had the coach side represented.
Coaches are
adequately.
wonderful for what their purpose is. If they're a life coach, or a health coach, or a sports coach, or it could be a breath coach. It could be any theme, but they're coaching and teaching and training, not necessarily doing therapy with the person.
Okay, so let's explain what that means by therapy. Because, for example, I worked with an addiction coach, right? And earlier in my life, and I also worked with, obviously, a lot of work with a sponsor, okay, in recovery, whose pretty much sole qualification was they got sober from the thing that I was trying to get sober from. Both not therapists. How would you? What is the line that crosses into therapy? Because when I'm dealing with
Diagnosing, they gave you the original diagnosis? Did you, let's say, get insurance to pay for it, did they give you a diagnosis for that?
They called me a sex addict. That's all right.
Okay.
Well, maybe not. I was originally a therapist.
You get what I'm saying.
Yes.
So they're not necessarily qualified to diagnose.
Okay.
And treatment is different than coaching.
Okay, so that's what I
Psychological
understand.
treatment, so it depends on the modality that you've studied. So if you're a cognitive behavioral therapist, you're going to do cognitive behavioral therapist. It doesn't mean that a coach can't use CBT techniques or DBT techniques, but you're trained in that specialty.
But so someone's listening to this and they're working with a coach. Okay, how do they know when a conversation has crossed in your mind?
They may not know. The client may never know until later on when they say, oh, that's why they said that? Oh. And then they need to sort something out maybe later with a therapist. I get people who come not because they've had a coach, but they had a coach and it wasn't sufficient. So let's say they were able to
I've had coach and therapist at the same time.
Figure out their schedule. Let's say they were disorganized and they wanted a life coach to help them with scheduling, but they also have shalom bias things and they also have emotional things and they've got psychological things and they also have anxieties. And a coach should not be really cricking in all of those kind of areas. If they are a coach specifically for a particular area and that's where their qualification is, they need to stay in their
to stay in their lane.
wheelhouse.
Right, so I'm saying like with an addiction coach, right, so or a sponsor, if you're talking about the inventory,
ideally,
all of those things,
the
I mean-
person has already experienced it, and that's how they're really helpful to you.
right, exactly. That's what I like about coaches. Meaning my bias, not a coach or therapist, my bias is towards people who do their work, who do their own work.
Yes, of course.
And
of
a
course.
therapist could or can't. Some do, some
Well,
don't.
you know, every school or every supervisor encourages you to go for therapy for at least a period of time, and sometimes currently and concurrently while you're working with your clients.
True, but
for
that's
your own self-awareness.
True, and some people you meet and they've worked hard on themselves. You can see what do they call it? Balavoda, right? They've done the work of digging in internally, and others have studied a subject really, really well, and they know it.
Yes, and you know what? I've got a very, very dear colleague. His name is Henry Pickens. He works in a modality that I'm trained in called havening, the havening techniques. It's new. They're going to call it pseudoscience. That's fine. In 5 years, they'll say, oh my gosh, it's fabulous. And it's based on self-soothing, the soothing touch, the face, the hands, the arms, like hugging. And Harry is eminently trained in this modality, and he's trained in many other things. And he's not a licensed psychotherapist. He's not a licensed trained person. And I went to him once just to discuss some personal things myself.
Right.
I respect people. You want to make sure, though, that the person is using what they know for you, not veering off into other foreign
essentially stay in your lane.
areas. Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. Okay, so that's your overall message. And with a therapist, at least you know their lane.
Yeah, and the therapist should know their lane too.
Yeah, of course.
Like, hey, look, if somebody brings something up to me that I'm not comfortable with, I will make a referral. I'm not going to just take a case that's not in my wheelhouse either.
Right. No, with a therapist, it's more clear. The lane is kind of outlined very clearly. I'm your client. I'm not the other person's. Right? Sometimes that can get very hazy.
But I work with clients who also have coaches.
Sure.
Because they're working on a specific thing. And I even have 2 or 3 clients who are working with 2 therapists. So when that happens, it's a little tricky.
Right.
And I make sure that I've communicated with that therapist. They allow me to. I have to. And say, we're doing 2 different jobs.
What would be an example of that?
Let's say, for instance, a person is in therapy with someone for a long time already. And they've got a good relationship. They're not breaking that relationship off. But that person doesn't give skills. Mostly CBT and talk therapy and stuff like that, and helping them manage in that way. But what if a person has anxiety and that person can't give them a tool like a breathing technique or a self-management technique, a self-regulation technique, or a meditation technique, or a safe place guided imagery technique? They don't know that stuff. They just know their CBT and their talk therapy. She's not going to run away from that person.
Right.
She'll come to me specifically for tools.
Oh, okay, understood.
Or vice versa. Let's say a person's been teaching them such and such. They want to come to me for therapy. So we make sure that the work is absolutely clearly divided. So either the client doesn't have to keep repeating the same thing, or feel like this one's wrong and this one's right, or this one's guiding me differently on the same issue. You also don't want to have tension between the therapists. You also don't want to dilute the therapy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what is that in Judaism, right? Not to go ask 2 rabbis the same question.
Exactly.
Right, then you're shopping your answer.
Don't dance at 2 weddings.
Right. Okay, beautiful. We covered a number of different topics.
A lot of things.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's anything left unfinished that you want to say, or final words? I know you got to get to this.
Not in particular now. It sounds like you really you knew what to ask to kind of fill some holes. I'll have to do it again when I come down.
There was one point where you said to like that would be a whole podcast, like to drill in much further.
About my getting into TM, becoming observant, changing over, why I stopped TM, how I stopped TM, the whole story with Rabbi Friedman. There's a lot of details to it. One was when I saw that book. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been praying to a Hindu deity for 4 years.
Right.
And even though I wasn't, right, I had no intentions.
Wasn't your intention, exactly.
Right? But like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Even as a Reformed Jew, I knew that God is one. That I knew. We said Shema. My parents, may they rest in peace, they taught us basic Jewish values. Not lots of mitzvahs, but Jewish values. So I said Shema. I knew that God is one. When I found out that I'm talking to a goddess, and there are many of them, and every page in that book had another one, that was uncomfortable.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And
You're
I want to
very welcome.
acknowledge and honor your commitment to the Rebbe's words to
thank you very much.
bring
it is an honor.
the
it's
healing
an honor
modalities.
to follow,
Yes.
to try my best to follow the Rebbe's request for
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah, that was my disappointment when I watched years ago with Kosher for what was happening. Is so offer the option that's okay
If
for
these people need this, we need to find the Rebbe's alternative for it then.
Yes.
We need to find, if it's satisfying some need, but maybe harming others, or people are afraid because they heard from the rabbis it's not kosher, we need to find something that works. That's why I really believe in collaboration. That's why when a school calls me or an organization calls me to ask, or the Rav told them to call me, I feel relieved. That was one more place that has what the Rebbe requested. A kosher version of it. One quick story. A woman called me a few months ago, frantic, because a Rav, I'm not going to say where, what community, what city, whatever, a Rav whom she called at a particular based in told her she could take a particular course, a training course in yoga. And soon, a couple meetings in, she was fine. A couple meetings in, all of a sudden, they had them doing yoga sutras, which is prayers, Hindu prayers. She was furious at the Rav. Even our rabbis don't know enough about healing and alternative methods. This is one of the things that Divi and I talk about. We need to educate ourselves. You want to collaborate? Well, those rabbis can't collaborate. They don't even know what they're talking to. We need to educate them. We need panels.
Right.
We need conversations with professionals and medical and mental health professionals and people who experience these things, whether they're lay people or not. We need to hear a dialogue, a conversation.
It would be like a rabbi ruling on whether you can use an elevator without understanding how electricity works. He may know the law
If they're the
Shabbos.
ones telling us what we need to do, they need to be educated. There are people who are afraid to answer questions about yoga or meditation because they don't know. Well, get educated. Those are your congregants.
Right. It's happening and it's needed and the need is...
Yeah, it's happening.
It's meeting a need.
We're talking, if it were 40 years ago, they wouldn't need to know. It's now. And everybody needs meditation and everybody needs something alternative because our medical system is not serving us.
Right, that's what I was saying earlier. That's what I meant about the expert comment. Right, is that the medical system is not serving us.
Let's find something. Maybe we need to collaborate.
Okay, I agree. First of all, we are right now.
Okay, that's true.
This is. And hopefully there'll be more opportunities. We'll measure the success of the podcast by how many Noga downloads we trigger.
I'll let you know.
We'll see. Let us know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
What
Rus
an
Devorah.
opportunity.
Thank you.
You got it.
Came full circle. Beautiful.